Essentially, Elder Yoast's situation has been that he was involved in a very progressive development. He was over to Singapore for about a month, setting up, I think, the first overseas division archive. And in being preoccupied with that situation for so long, he felt that he would ask me to briefly read the sections that are involved in the paper that he has written. I'll only read the first and the last section here because you can see that most of the paper is a listing. In picture and sound, the story of our work. The audio visuals presented in this list provide examples of various types and formats of films, multimedia programs, videotapes, etc., that have been produced or used by the Seventh-Day Adventist Church. This is not a complete list by any means, nor do all the items listed necessarily belong on the list. Because the survey responses were sometimes incomplete, we could not determine the source or producer of some items. The information given here is based almost entirely on a questionnaire sent this spring to communication departments of the General Conference and its divisions, as well as the unions and conferences of North America. Of the 75 offices polled, 22 responded. A more thorough investigation would probably lead to doubling of the list. The holdings of SDA libraries has not been investigated, although the Andrews University Heritage Room reports a collection of 103 films depicting Emmanuel Missionary College and Andrews University from the 1920s to 1980s. No attempt has been made at this time to show which films, etc., are current and which are out of print or unavailable. Presumably, at least one copy of each item exists at the office reporting it. Excluded are items on Bible teachings and general religious films. This sampling is given to provide a useful base for the development of a possible union list of Adventist audiovisual materials and to encourage the adequate preservation of these materials as a part of our church heritage. The challenge of collecting and preserving denominational audiovisual materials. This is page 8. The preservation of audiovisual materials should be an integral part of our general concern for preserving all records of our church's life and history for future study and inspiration. A great step forward may be taken if each library and archives will take responsibility for acquiring and preserving audiovisual materials that relate to its parent organization. The collection of such materials might begin with selected photographs used in student publications each year and extend to sets of slides and public relations films, and then on to multimedia presentations and videotapes. Storage of audiovisual materials presents some challenges because the possibilities of deterioration are greater for film and magnetic tape than for paper. In general, audiovisual materials should be stored in a dust-free container or area where relative humidity is between 15 and 50% and the temperature is 21 degrees centigrade or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Chemical substances such as are used to exterminate moths and other insects should not be allowed to come into contact with the film. In fact, some chemical substances may produce gases which, over a period of time, cause deterioration of the emulsion or base. Color transparencies and color negatives are more subject to deterioration under unsatisfactory storage conditions than black and white film. Magnetic tape should be rewound occasionally, perhaps every 3 years, and be kept away from a permanent magnet or wiring that carries a heavy current. It may be stored in metal containers or cabinets without loss of sound recording. You'll notice the way that the material is divided. He has sections on mission awareness, institutional work of the church, departments and services, and you can see there very quickly that the Health and Temperance Department has made the major contribution to this list. Quite a listing of materials available from Health and Temperance. Lay Activities also has quite a representative list. Then he has materials relating to overseas division work, the church at work, evangelism, worker and lay training, Seventh-Day Adventist Church in general, and then a miscellaneous section along with Adventist broadcast productions. Some may want to comment on phases of this or discuss portions of this material, and you're certainly welcome to do so if you would like to at this time. You may have some input concerning this whole question of preserving audiovisual materials. Ms. Jensen. I don't know why, what the basis for was for the exclusion on that. I haven't discussed this with Elder Yoast, and I'm not sure what the rationale was for that type of exclusion. There are other things, perhaps, that could be listed here too. The Mission Spotlight, for instance, materials, which we have some of those materials at the General Conference Archives. But I don't know why materials, maybe it just would have been too mammoth a task to try and gain a listing of the evangelistic type of materials that have been used and so forth. I don't know. I don't know the rationale for it. Jim? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have a feeling that Elder Yoast is quite interested in pursuing that first thing that you've mentioned, especially the possibility of the union list. He is suggesting it here, and I think now that he's plunged into this project, I think he probably would be interested in developing that. I would suspect that probably that would be beyond the realm of possibility for us. We're trying to do as much as we can in the way of microfilming various kinds of holdings that would make them more accessible to other institutions. And our staff is really our staff consists of two people essentially in archives. And Elder Yoast is administering the entire Department of Archives and Statistics and has a multifaceted type of responsibility. But it's very difficult to try and keep up with current research and facilitating the materials that we have and so forth, and then trying to make other things available through microfilm, and it's kind of draining our resources as it is right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the Education Department is working in some areas that will aid in that in your desire. I don't know how much of that is audiovisual, or whether it's more textual, but probably the Education Department would be. Yeah. Well, there's a road for the future for somebody, I'm sure. Brother Baybrook. Let me go on to the next section. I have about 20 minutes. I could get started on, if you look down there at the 330 area, you'll see a very pretentious title. I didn't realize how pretentious that title. I can't blame Jim for that title. He had printed the title that I sent him, but at the time that I sent it, I hadn't done the research yet, and I didn't realize how pretentious the title was. That's at the 330 section. SDA biographical sources in the Washington area, 2 case studies. My new title is A Few of the Biographical Sources in the Washington Area Pertaining to W.R. French. I was going to do 2 figures. My objective was to do 2 figures, primarily a 19th century figure and then a 20th century figure, to show the possibilities for uncovering biographical sources about these people. I wanted to take relatively unknown denominational figures, and as I began to probe, a fellow that I chose for the 19th century, William Covert. Now, if you look in the encyclopedia, you won't find an article on William Covert. But Covert was a conference president. One of the reasons I wanted to take Covert, too, was he was in the Civil War, and I knew I could find interesting Civil War materials down at the Library of Congress on him. But the material became so overwhelming that I forgot the 19th century man, and I kind of focused on W.R. French for the 20th century person. By the way, how many of you here have heard or know of W.R. French? I'd say maybe half know the name. I knew the name. I had seen his name in connection with his attendance at the 1919 Bible Conference, but really it was a document that I happened to just pass by one day, which made me realize that he had been called out of retirement at the age of 72 to teach Bible at Newbold for a year. And I said, well, that sounds like an interesting person to pursue. He was not an administrator. He wasn't connected with the GC. And so how much and what sources of information can I find about W.R. French? If I could find an acceptable quantity of material relating to him, it would help to define the varied sources of biographical information about a non-administrator. I'd like to take you through the research process by which I accumulated the body of material that I have here about W.R. French. These are varying types of collections, all directly mentioning his name, all directly dealing with him. And before we start on that, I'd also like to give you just a sort of brief biographical sketch of French. In fact, let's start with our first source, the Seventh-Day Adventist Encyclopedia. Here's what the encyclopedia says about William Robert French, 1881 to 1968. A minister, Bible teacher, he was born in Cedar Grove, Texas, and was a member of the first graduating class at Keene. In 1899, he began nurse's training, and 5 years later, he began his work in the ministry at Keene. He was a minister and a Bible teacher in several of our colleges, and a number of churches were built under his direction. He and his family served in India for one term of mission service. That brief paragraph points us in about 10 different directions to obtain more information about French. But much work can be avoided by gaining more specific information about him. One such way would be to check the source material that went into the making of the encyclopedia. That source material would reveal the sources for the article and also the article's author. The Review and Herald office contains the source material that went into the making of the encyclopedia, and a quick look at that will reveal very quickly who wrote the article and what sources were used for the preparation of that article. Another source of biographical information, obituaries. The General Conference Archives maintains a card index on obituaries. It's geared to the necrology files in the yearbooks, and very helpful. It contains obituaries not only of from the Review or from Union papers, but also overseas division papers, and it leads us to a number of varied sources. And it's easy to trace not just our main character from that source, but also obituaries of his relatives. You add more names, and it becomes a much broader picture. We quickly pick up obituaries of his father, brother, and wife, all of which shed light on our central subject. French was born in Cedar Grove, Texas, but 2 years later his brother was born in Wills Point, Texas. Tells us of a change of location very quickly. His father was born in 1847 in Alabama, moved to Cedar Grove in 1869, and converted to Adventism by W.A. McCutcheon and W.T. Drummond in 1888. His father entered the ministry in 1890 and was, quote, an unusual Bible student. A wealth of additional details and further source possibilities are available from the family obituaries. In addition, we have 3 obituaries for French, and each gives additional insight. The first was obviously what was used to prepare the encyclopedia article, but does list, in addition, the survivors. His wife, Nettie, a son, James B. French, a daughter, Mrs. Mary Douglas, and others. The second obit gives his place of death, Boulder City, Nevada, and his date of marriage, along with his wife's maiden name. Our third obituary tells us that French came to Keene in 1893 with his parents, and that he graduated Keene Academy in 1898. We're getting more specific. He had 5 children, 3 of whom were dead by 1969, the date of this obituary. It gives the cities where the surviving children lived in 1969. The obituary was written by a former student of French's, Stanley J. Steiner. The yearbook quickly reveals that Steiner is currently living in the Atlantic Union Conference. We thus can see that there are vast possibilities developing just from obituary information. We're now working with a minister, a missionary, and a teacher. Chances are he must have done some writing. The best place to start is the index card to the Advent Review. We find that French wrote 14 articles for the Review between 1911 and 1939. One is mistakenly credited to him that was written by his brother, T.M. French. These cards are available on microfiche. Well, what do we learn by reading the 14 articles that he wrote? Well, we gain some insight into his theological suppositions. The 1912 article on the Trinity raises some questions, but after all, the Review printed it. That's true, but remember, it was 1912 and even as late as 1919 that many were holding a concept of Christ as a created being. We see him taking fairly certain positions on the prophecies. We gain information regarding his mission experience and that of his co-workers. We even learn that in 1914, he's the subject of a Calcutta court deposition because of a Hindu seeking refuge in the mission. Is this a lead worth pursuing? Well, as we pursue it, we realize that the Calcutta English language newspapers publish court proceedings. So it's just a question of investigating those Calcutta newspapers downtown, and we will come up with that court proceeding of this deposition concerning W.R. French. We finally get a glimpse of the man we're dealing with since the 1933 Advent Review prints a picture of him with his article. We see that he's strong in his use of the spirit of prophecy, positive in his assertions, and surprisingly modern in his thrust toward discovering the particular spiritual gifts given to believers. The Review Art Library is a very useful source of photos, especially biographical photos. And through the use of the Review Art Library, we will uncover a number of W.R. French photos. It's helpful also to know that the Review maintains an index to the youth's instructor and to Insight. However, when we look there, we don't find any W.R. French articles. There's likewise no French articles or entries in the library book pamphlet card index. We next will go to Union papers. Let's look at the Southwestern Union record, for we know that French began his ministry in Texas in 1904. What kind of information can we find there? It's nice to pick up a few articles by his father, and from them we learn that the family was a strong unit working in the cause together. These early Union papers contained state sections where field reports, news notes, reports of Union and local conference sessions are all presented. The field reports give good insight into evangelistic methodology and problems, and the news notes provide a rich source of such biographical value as wedding information, general news, personal disasters, and so forth. We learn of a narrow escape from fire by his parents. Conference actions provide information concerning ordinations, credentials, labor assignments, and so forth. William Robert French is first mentioned as a self-supporting laborer in the March 14, 1904 issue. Interestingly, he goes by the name Robert French. He apparently worked with his father during some evangelistic campaigns, and by 1906 receives a ministerial license. News notes also reveal French teaching at Keene Academy in 1906. That same year, his father organizes the Claiborne, Texas church. We later learn that this is where both families are buried. In 1907, we pick up a few reports of Robert French's evangelistic work. This time, we learn that his wife and child are traveling with him. Some of his camp meeting assignments are interesting. In 1908, he was ordered, or he was told anyway, to discuss the topic, "Our duty to unite with the WCTU and other temperance workers when other issues are not involved." We also see him constantly assigned to pitching the large, not the small tents at the camp meetings. We pick up a few articles written by French and see very clearly an early focus upon Bible prophecies and signs of the times. We see the father and son working together and building churches. Not just building up churches, but actually building churches. This will be typical of French throughout his ministry. The specific locations and dates of meetings all lead to possibilities of obtaining reports of these meetings from local newspapers. If there was one thing that really surprised me, it's how much you will find in local newspapers about Seventh-Day Adventists. Just amazing. French is ordained at the Texas camp meeting, August 1909, and that year serves as preceptor at Keene Academy. Not only does he wallpaper and involve himself in carpentry at the academy, but he also leads in securing donations to mission work in Africa. They send a cultivator and a set of encyclopedias to the mission station where his brother is serving in Africa. Incidentally, it's rather surprising to see how much foreign mission information you gain from using these early Union papers. You wouldn't think you would find foreign mission information there, but the tithe exchange program then was somewhat different. And what happened was that local conferences, when they had more than enough tithes to pay the ministers in their local area, would then sponsor missionaries overseas, therefore maintain a constant interest in the overseas mission work where the individual that they sent was working. So you see constant reports of foreign missions in Union papers, which you wouldn't think of ordinarily. In 1910, we see the notice of his acceptance of a call to India and learn that he will pass through Tacoma Park on his way to New York City. It's interesting to note that he accepted the call just at the time he was slated for an administrative assignment, since the Oklahoma Conference had elected him as educational, MV, and field missionary secretary. As we check the advertisements in the paper, that is the Southwestern Union Record, we learn that French maintained a 4-room frame house in Keene on 2.5 acres. So he's selling his house now. He's going overseas. So you learn what kind of house he lived in because he's advertising it in the Union paper. He had an orchard of peach trees, mostly Alberta. He had plums, apples, berries, and it was near the church and the school. We also come across some excellent photos in these early papers. A nice 1909 photo of Keene Academy. The January 4, 1910 issue contains a valuable history of Seventh-Day Adventists in the Southwestern Union. It includes a history of Adventism in various states, as well as histories of the various institutions publishing the medical work. There's a history of the black work in Texas, and even a history of the Southwestern Union Record. Well, what about overseas mission workers' papers? The Eastern or India Union Tidings is the overseas equivalent of the Southwestern Union Record, and French serves in this area from 1910 to 1917. He arrives to continue the work in Bengal 2 months after his predecessor dies of cholera. He arrives in time to hear Prescott give a series to the workers at the year-end meetings on Bible prophecy. The confrontation of two varying philosophies might have been quite interesting. We find much the same kind of information we found in our Union paper. We see news notes, personal information, conference and union proceedings, photos, lists of workers, etc. Evangelistic methodology this time is somewhat different because it includes a mission houseboat. We again see French involved in construction work at the Bengal mission. He works on a home for European workers, 3 homes for native workers, a church, dispensary, and school. Within a year, French performs his first marriage, and he performs it in Bengali. Also in 1911, he speaks at the annual conference at Bengal on the Eastern question. He would continue to hold opinions on that subject. By 1912, French had passed the official government exam in the Bengali language. 1913, French had been feeling sluggish for some time and is operated on for appendicitis. By 1914, French is no longer listed as director of the Bengal mission stations. No explanations given in the Eastern Tidings. We do see him conducting evangelistic meetings in Calcutta amongst the educated and the English language Indians. Here's an interesting resolution adopted at the India Union Mission meeting, published in, all of this information comes from the India Tidings here. Notice this statement in the Eastern Tidings of October 1916. The sermons of the series were published in the 2 leading daily papers of the city, which have a circulation of over 30,000. Through reading these printed sermons, at least 2 are keeping the Sabbath. As a result of those printed sermons, inquiries were received from different parts of India. We thus see that there is much, not only on French, but also on Seventh-day Adventist works in English language newspapers in Bombay and Calcutta. In pursuing this lead, I went down to the Library of Congress and did find some useful things in the Calcutta English language newspapers, which are on film. Unfortunately, I had a day to spend there, but when the material is not on film, you have to wait a half a day to get it. So although they do have English language Calcutta and Bombay newspapers that are not on film, I didn't have the half a day to spend looking through the papers to find these articles, but we have every reason to suspect that they can easily be uncovered. We learn also that from the Union paper there, from the India Union Tidings, that French is also publishing in the India Signs and Times. So in going to the Signs of the Times, we uncover additional articles by W.R. French. In other words, overseas papers are generally of 3 different types. You have 3 overseas papers to work with. You have a workers' paper, primarily for the missionaries there, giving news notes about the missionaries there, giving that type of information. Then you have a a health paper, a health outreach paper, which did not involve French, but you also have an evangelistic paper, articles designed to tell people about the Adventist message. Two of those three involve French. But we'll continue our little story about W.R. French and the sources that shed light on him at the next session at 3:30.